All right, you heard the president saying he wants to declassify everything in relation to the origins of special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. Also addressing this New York Times bombshell today, confirming the FBI sent an undercover agent in 2016 to ask campaign advisor George Papadopoulos about Russia. Talk about it with tonight's Power Panel. Former national spokesperson for Hillary Clinton's campaign, Josh Schwerin. Fox News contributor, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew McCarthy. And RNC committee woman for California, Harmeet Dhillon. Great to have all of you with us tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Shannon.
Okay, so of course, there are plenty of questions about why this article has come out now. Here is what Rush Limbaugh is theorizing today.
The FBI New York Times story today. There's no question that it is trying to get ahead of the Horowitz report, which is looking into all of this. And the money quote from the piece, it is unclear whether Mr. Horowitz will find fault with the FBI's decision to have Ms. Turk, whose real name is not publicly known, meet with Mr. Papadopoulos. We're now on offense. They're on defense, and you can see them behaving in that way. Sending Clapper out today on CNN for no earthly reason. This New York Times story out of the blue, which is a CYA attempt if there ever was one.
All right, Josh, how much does this have to do with the upcoming release of the Horowitz report?
It's entirely possible that it does, but I think the idea that it would be wrong for the FBI to conduct legal surveillance when they have one of our allied nations, in this case Australia, come to them and say, a Trump aide says Russia offered to help. They have to investigate that. To not investigate that would be a dereliction of their duty. So I hope that the FBI looked into all of these claims and took them seriously. In this case, Russia was interfering with the election. Whether Papadopoulos ended up being an integral part of that or not, they did intervene in the election. They did commit crimes against our country, and I'm glad the FBI investigated it.
All right, so Andy, you know there are a number of people, including the Attorney General, who is taking all kinds of flack. We're going to talk more about that. But a number of people have said, if it was so bad, why didn't they go to someone who, like yourself, is an experienced U.S. attorney associated with the campaign or familiar with things like a Chris Christie or Rudy Giuliani? Why didn't they do more to warn the Trump campaign at that point?
Because, Shannon, this was not a question of 2 or 3 bad apples around the campaign, that were in the orbit of the Trump campaign. That's a story that's been put out for a long time, and it's never been true. I thought the most interesting thing, to my mind, in the Times story today was that they kept mentioning that she was sent over, this informant who conducted this activity there, the surveillance activity. She was sent over to see what was the involvement of the Trump campaign with the Russians. And I've thought from the beginning here that the target of this investigation was the candidate. It was Donald Trump. They believed the Steele dossier. If they hadn't believed it, they wouldn't have brought it to the FISA court. The theory of the Steele dossier was that Donald Trump himself was in cahoots with Russia, that there was this big Trump-Russia conspiracy, and it was running from the top. So you do a defensive briefing when you want to go into, when you think you can go into somebody and say, hey, you have a problem with 1, 2, 3 people that we're worried about. But the one person that a campaign can't get rid of is the candidate.
That's
and
true.
If they decided that Donald Trump was the problem, then a defensive briefing wasn't going to do much for them.
Well, Harmeet, what do you make about, Josh's contention that they were really worried about some inappropriate influence of Russia over the candidate? Of course, they should be, in the interest of the country, looking into it.
Right. I mean, and that might be true if we didn't have so many examples of lies, of text between senior FBI officials, clearly looking to frame the president, looking to frame his advisors, and looking to stir up this dirt. So the reason there weren't any defensive briefings is because they wanted this to be true, in my opinion. And I don't think, to Andy's point about really believing the dossier, I'm not sure they really believed the dossier or really cared if it were true. It was a weapon to use to discredit Donald Trump, and it was continued to be used to discredit him even after he won the election. And so that's why that happened. And why all of this is coming out now is exactly for the reason that Rush mentioned. It is to get ahead of the fact that there are going to be heads rolling on Capitol Hill, because we now have a new sheriff in town, and the Attorney General is clearly going to get to the bottom of this. And laws were broken. You cannot, as an FBI, a couple of FBI or 4 or 10 FBI rogue agents began running covert ops overseas and do that against American citizens. George Papadopoulos' response to this New York Times story is that actually it was a CIA intel operation with Turkish intel, and it wasn't FBI. So we actually don't have all the answers about this yet.
I think it's important. The FBI did brief Trump directly before the election, and he publicly denied anything about Russia's involvement. And the Papadopoulos tip came in before the dossier was in the FBI's hands.
Well,
so none of that
Andy's
is
saying
true.
no, because there are contentious things about exactly what triggered what and when the dossier came versus Papadopoulos. Andy, you look like you want to address that.
Yeah, well, they were talking about doing a defensive briefing. This is in the House Intelligence Committee's report. In March of 2016, Attorney General Lynch, Director Comey, and then Deputy Director McCabe talked about doing a defensive brief to the campaign, where you go in and tell the campaign, we think you have a problem with Russia. The briefing that I think Josh is talking about is the standard briefing that they give to the candidates once they're the two candidates for president. That happened in August, 6 months later. So that's not what we're talking about. A defensive briefing that they could have done.
I believe they did that too. They said we're concerned that they're trying to breach your campaign.
All right, we're out of time, so we got to leave it there.
They did.
But Andy says no. Okay. Josh says yes. We'll dig it up and let our viewers decide, but we'll try to get some information out on that timeline as well. Thank you all for being with us tonight.
Thanks, Shannon.
All right, Facebook under fire for banning users it calls dangerous.